the courtroom became so quiet that I could hear the old wall clock behind the judge ticking between each breath. My son Daniel stood less than 15 feet away from me, wearing the same expensive navy blue suit he had worn to my 72nd birthday dinner 6 months earlier. Back then, he smiled while cutting my cake. Today he would not even look into my eyes. Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses and held up a small digital recorder inside a clear evidence bag. "Mr. Robert Whitmore," he asked, looking directly at me, "can you confirm that this is the device you personally used to record the conversations submitted into evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor. You understand these recordings may permanently change the outcome of this case?" "I do." Across the room, Daniel finally looked at me. Not with love. Not with guilt. Only annoyance. The same expression he had worn every time I questioned another withdrawal from my bank account. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Daniel nodded confidently, convinced none of this could possibly matter. He still believed I was exactly what he had spent months telling everyone I was. A confused old man. A grieving widower. Someone who no longer understood money. Someone whose memory could not be trusted. The judge pressed a button. A familiar voice filled the courtroom. Daniel's voice. "Dad won't remember this conversation tomorrow. Once the doctors sign the evaluation, the house becomes easy. After that, we'll move him somewhere comfortable where he can't interfere." Every person inside the courtroom froze. Daniel's attorney slowly lowered his pen. My daughter-in-law Emily closed her eyes. I did not move. I had already cried all the tears those words deserved. But this story did not begin inside that courtroom. It began almost 40 years earlier, when I believed that working harder than everyone else would guarantee a peaceful old age. Welcome back to Revenge Cold Stories. Before we go any further, drop your first name and your city in the comments, subscribe, and become part of this community where stories remind us that dignity is worth protecting. My name is Robert Whitmore. I am 73 years old. For 39 years and 4 months, I worked as a civil engineer for the same construction company. During those years, I supervised the completion of 86 public infrastructure projects, including 17 bridges, 34 elementary schools, 11 hospitals, and hundreds of miles of roadway. I never became famous. Nobody ever interviewed me. But every time I drove across a bridge my team had built, I quietly smiled. Something I helped create was still carrying families safely home. My wife Margaret used to tease me whenever we crossed one of them. "You're checking the concrete again, aren't you?" "I always check." "You retired 5 years ago." "I know. You still think someone forgot a bolt." "I probably always will." She would laugh. Then she'd squeeze my hand. That laugh disappeared 2 years before everything fell apart. Cancer took Margaret in just 11 months. She was 70. Until the day she died, she still worried more about whether I remembered to eat breakfast than about herself. That was who she was. When she passed away, people brought casseroles, flowers, cards, sympathy. After 3 weeks, everyone slowly returned to their own lives. Grief stayed. Every morning I still poured 2 cups of coffee, before realizing only one of them would be used. For 50 years we had shared breakfast at exactly 7 o'clock. Old habits refuse to disappear simply because someone dies. Daniel visited often during those first months. Too often looking back. At the time I thought he was worried about me. Now I know he was studying me. Studying my routines. Studying my paperwork. Studying my finances. He always asked the same questions in different ways. "Dad, where do you keep your bank documents?" "Dad, have you updated your will?" "Dad, do you still pay everything by yourself?" "Dad, are you sure online banking isn't confusing?" I mistook curiosity for concern. That mistake almost cost me everything. Daniel was 46. He had always been intelligent. Very intelligent. He graduated near the top of his business school class. He could explain investment portfolios, tax strategies, and corporate acquisitions better than anyone I had ever met. But Daniel possessed another talent. He could convince himself that every selfish decision was actually logical. He didn't think of himself as greedy. He thought of himself as efficient. Whenever someone stood between him and what he wanted, he believed they were simply delaying the inevitable. That mindset had followed him since childhood. I remembered one afternoon when he was 10 years old. His younger cousin, Michael, had spent nearly 3 months building a detailed model railroad in my garage. Tiny houses, hand-painted trees, miniature stations. Daniel accidentally stepped on one section while running. Michael burst into tears. Instead of apologizing, Daniel shrugged. It was going to break someday anyway. Margaret immediately knelt beside him. "No, Daniel." He frowned. "What? You were talking about something someone loved." "I didn't mean to." "I know. Then why is everyone upset?" "Because accidents happen." "I said it was an accident." "The accident isn't the problem." He looked confused. "The problem is that your first concern was explaining why it shouldn't matter, instead of noticing how much it hurt someone else." Daniel never forgot that conversation. Unfortunately, he never truly learned from it either. As an adult, he became successful. He managed regional sales for a medical equipment company. He earned nearly $200,000 a year, including bonuses. His wife Emily worked as a physical therapist. Together they made more money than Margaret and I had ever imagined earning. Yet somehow they were always struggling. A larger house. A newer SUV. Private schools. Luxury vacations financed through credit cards. Everything had to look successful. Even when it wasn't. Emily wasn't cruel. She was anxious. She believed appearances created security. Daniel believed ownership created power. Together they made dangerous financial decisions, while convincing themselves they were simply keeping up with everyone else. I did not know any of this until much later. Parents rarely see the full financial reality of their adult children. We only see birthdays, holiday dinners, smiles, carefully selected conversations. After Margaret died, Daniel insisted on helping with my paperwork. "You've handled enough by yourself, Dad. I can manage." "I know you can." He smiled. "But why should you?" That sounded reasonable. I let him organize my filing cabinet. I let him review insurance policies. I even gave him copies of utility account numbers in case something happened to me. Each decision seemed harmless. Each one quietly removed another layer of independence. Months passed. I remained healthy. Every Tuesday I volunteered at the public library. Every Thursday I played chess with 3 retired teachers. Every Saturday morning I walked exactly 3 miles around Lake Harrison. My doctor described my memory as excellent for my age. I completed crossword puzzles without difficulty. Balanced my checkbook every month. Prepared my own taxes. Maintained my own home. Life was slower after Margaret's death. But it was still my life. Then little things started happening. Bills I knew I had paid suddenly appeared overdue. Bank statements arrived late. Appointments were mysteriously rescheduled. Daniel always had an explanation. "The mail has been unreliable. The bank made an error. The doctor's office called me because they couldn't reach you." Every explanation sounded believable. Separately, together they formed a pattern I failed to recognize. One afternoon I visited my bank because an investment statement looked unfamiliar. The balance seemed lower than expected. The teller smiled politely. "Your son already discussed those transfers with us." "My son?" "Yes. He isn't on my investment account." She stopped smiling. So, she excused herself and returned with the branch manager. He invited me into his office. After reviewing my identification, he frowned. Mr. Whitmore, according to our records, your son was recently granted financial authority. I stared at him. No. He turned his computer screen. There it was. My signature. Or something that looked remarkably similar. I knew immediately I had never signed those documents. Every letter leaned slightly differently. The capital R in Robert curved the wrong direction. Tiny differences. Enough for me. Not enough for someone who had never watched me sign thousands of engineering approvals throughout 4 decades. I drove directly to Daniel's house. He answered the door smiling. Dad, you should have called. I went to the bank. For the first time, his smile disappeared. He stepped outside and quietly closed the front door behind him. What happened? They say you have authority over my accounts. He sighed. I was going to explain. When? You've been overwhelmed. I asked when. He folded his arms. The paperwork became necessary. Necessary. You've been forgetting things. I have not. Dad, I have not. His voice became softer. The kind of soft voice people use when speaking to children. We're only trying to protect you. Protect me. Those 2 words would become the foundation of every lie that followed. I looked directly into my son's eyes. Did I sign those papers? He hesitated. Only for a second. Then he answered. You agreed they were best. That wasn't my question. Silence. I realized then that he wasn't denying it. He was avoiding it. And that frightened me more than any confession could have. I stood there on Daniel's front porch longer than either of us expected. Cars rolled slowly through the neighborhood. Children rode bicycles across the cul-de-sac. Someone nearby was mowing a lawn. The world continued exactly as it always had, while my entire understanding of my own family quietly shifted beneath my feet. Answer me, I said. Did I sign those papers? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. You signed a lot of documents after Mom passed away. I remember every one. Memory doesn't always work the way we think. There it was. Not an accusation. A suggestion. A seed. If he repeated it often enough, perhaps everyone else would begin believing it. Perhaps even I would. I've balanced $1 million construction budgets, I told him calmly. I've supervised hundreds of workers on dangerous job sites. Don't tell me I don't remember signing away control of my own money. His expression hardened. You don't have to get defensive. I'm asking for honesty. And I'm trying to help. You forged my signature. I did what needed to be done. Those 7 words stayed with me. Not because he admitted what he had done. Because he genuinely believed it. He wasn't nervous anymore. He wasn't apologizing. In his mind, he had crossed some invisible line months ago, and once he crossed it, there was no reason to look back. Emily opened the front door just enough to peek outside. Is everything okay? Daniel answered before I could. Everything's fine. She looked at me. I noticed uncertainty in her face. Not agreement. Not disagreement. Just uncertainty. That expression would make much more sense later. I drove home without saying another word. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, the house felt unfamiliar. Not because anything had changed. Because trust had. That evening I opened every file cabinet. Every drawer. Every safe. I spent almost 5 hours reviewing financial records dating back 6 years. Numbers had always comforted me. Numbers either added up or they didn't. Emotions could lie. Mathematics rarely did. Around midnight, I noticed 3 transfers totaling $118,400 that I did not recognize. Each transfer had occurred during the previous 8 months. Each had been described as family financial management. None had my authorization. I checked another account. 2 certificates of deposit had disappeared. Then another. Then another. By 2 o'clock in the morning, I realized almost $470,000 had quietly moved away from accounts Margaret, and I had spent decades building. I didn't sleep. The next morning I visited my attorney. His name was Thomas Reynolds. We had known each other for 23 years. He handled our estate planning after Margaret's diagnosis. When I placed the statements on his desk, he looked at them for nearly 20 minutes without speaking. Finally he leaned back. "Robert." "Yes. Has anyone recently suggested you're becoming forgetful?" I blinked. "Why? Answer first." "My son." "Anyone else?" "No." He folded his hands together. "I believe he's preparing something." "What?" "A legal argument." "What kind?" He sighed. "The kind where concerned adult children ask the court to appoint someone else to manage an elderly parent's finances." I stared at him. "You mean guardianship?" "Possibly. I'm perfectly capable." "I know that." "Then this ends today." "I hope so." Hope. Lawyers use that word when certainty no longer exists. Thomas immediately contacted the bank. Requested copies of every authorization. Requested surveillance footage if available. Requested signature records. He also gave me unexpected advice. "Start documenting everything." "I already keep records." "I mean conversations." "I don't understand." "Every conversation." I looked confused. He continued. "If someone is creating a false picture of your mental condition, facts matter, dates matter, exact words matter." That afternoon I bought a small digital voice recorder. It cost $89. It fit inside my shirt pocket. I never imagined it would eventually save my life. The first recording happened by accident. Daniel stopped by with groceries. He walked through my kitchen looking unusually cheerful. "I brought enough food for the week." "Thank you." He noticed unopened envelopes on the counter. "You still haven't organized your bills." "They're organized. I could take care of them." "I already have." He laughed softly. "Dad, I'm serious." "I know." "No." I looked directly at him. "You don't." He became quiet. Then he said something I almost missed. "You'll thank me eventually." That sentence echoed in my mind all evening. Not because it sounded threatening. Because it sounded rehearsed. Almost as if he had already decided what my future was supposed to look like. Over the next several weeks I carried the recorder everywhere. Not because I expected dramatic confessions. Because Thomas had told me ordinary conversations often reveal extraordinary intentions. He was right. The recordings captured dozens of little moments. Moments that sounded harmless by themselves, but devastating together. One afternoon Daniel accompanied me to a medical appointment. As we sat in the waiting room, he leaned closer. "When the doctor asks about your memory." "My memory." "Don't argue." "I'm not planning to." "If you forget something, just admit it." "I don't forget much." He smiled. "Everyone forgets." Then he added quietly, "Especially at your age." Another recording captured him talking on the phone while he thought I was asleep in the living room. "Don't worry," he whispered. "The evaluation will happen soon." A pause. "No, Dad won't fight it." Another pause. "He's too tired." Those words hurt more than I expected. Not because he underestimated me. Because he believed grief had made me weak. He mistook sadness for surrender. Margaret used to say people often confuse quiet people with powerless people. She was right. As the weeks continued, strange appointments began appearing on my calendar. Neurologists, memory specialists, psychological evaluations, appointments I had never scheduled. Daniel insisted they were routine. Just precautionary. I don't need them. It'll make everyone feel better. Who is everyone? He never answered. Instead, he smiled patiently, as though dealing with a stubborn child. The evaluations themselves were almost insulting. Doctors asked me today's date. The current president. Simple math problems. Lists of words. Drawings of clocks. I answered everything correctly. One physician actually smiled afterward. Your cognition appears excellent. Daniel interrupted before I could respond. He has good days and bad days. The doctor looked at him. What concerns have you observed? Daniel sighed dramatically. He forgets conversations. I don't. He becomes confused. I don't. He gets angry whenever anyone mentions finances. I stared at him. Because someone is stealing from me. The room became silent. Daniel looked disappointed. Almost relieved. He turned to the doctor. You see what I mean. For the first time I understood how dangerous manipulation could become. He wasn't trying to convince me. He was building a story. Every disagreement became evidence. Every objection became proof. Every attempt to defend myself was presented as irrational behavior. Afterward, the physician walked me to the parking lot alone. Quietly he asked, Mr. Whitmore. Yes. Do you feel safe? I answered honestly. I don't know anymore. He nodded slowly. If anything changes, call me. That conversation gave me hope. Not everyone accepted Daniel's version of reality. Some people still looked at facts instead of appearances. Unfortunately, facts move slowly. Manipulation moves quickly. 2 weeks later, I received an official envelope from the county court. My hands trembled before I even opened it. Inside was a petition. Daniel had formally requested that the court declare me mentally incapable of managing my financial affairs. He claimed I suffered from progressive cognitive decline. He claimed I was vulnerable to financial exploitation. He claimed immediate intervention was necessary to protect my assets. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was almost impossible to believe. The man asking the court to protect my money was the same man quietly taking it. At the bottom of the petition, attached as supporting evidence, were affidavits from neighbors. One claimed I wandered outside at night. Another claimed I forgot people's names. A third claimed I repeatedly misplaced my mail. Most of them were exaggerated. Some were completely false. I recognized every name. People who had only seen me for a few minutes at a time. People who believed they were helping. They had no idea they were becoming pieces of someone else's plan. I folded the papers carefully. Then I reached into my pocket, pressed one button, and began another recording. My name is Robert Whitmore, I said quietly into the recorder after closing my front door. Today is October 14th. I have just received a petition from my own son asking the court to declare me mentally incompetent. I am recording this because I understand exactly what is happening, and if anyone ever questions whether I knew these events as they occurred, this recording will answer that question. I placed the recorder on my kitchen table. For several minutes I simply stood there. The same kitchen where Margaret had baked birthday cakes. The same window where we watched our first snowfall every winter. The same wooden chair where Daniel had done his homework as a boy. Homes remember people. Every scratch on the floor carried a me. The investigation moved much more slowly than I expected. Television makes justice look fast. Real investigations are measured in weeks, then months. Detectives requested documents. Banks produced transaction histories. Accountants reviewed transfers dating back almost 3 years. Every answer created 3 new questions. I returned to my normal routine as much as possible. Tuesday mornings at the library. Thursday chess. Saturday walks around Lake Harrison. People who had quietly disappeared, while Daniel's story spread slowly, began returning. Some apologized. Some avoided the subject completely. A few simply hugged me without saying anything. I appreciated those hugs more than words. One cold January morning, I received a phone call from Detective Laura Simmons. Mr. Whitmore. Speaking. We've completed our preliminary financial review. And I'd like to meet in person. Her tone told me enough. This wasn't going to be a short conversation. Thomas joined me at the meeting. Detective Simmons arrived carrying 4 thick binders. She placed them carefully across the conference table. These represent every financial transaction involving your accounts over the past 36 months. I looked at the stack. I didn't realize there were so many. There are more than 1,200. She opened the first binder. Our forensic accountants identified 74 transactions requiring closer examination. Thomas nodded. How many appear unauthorized? 58. My stomach tightened. What was the total amount? She turned another page. $914,362. Neither Thomas nor I spoke. I honestly believed she had made a mistake. Almost $1 million. Yes, I didn't have that much in cash. You didn't. She slid another document toward me. They also borrowed against your investment portfolio. What? Using paperwork bearing your forged signature. I slowly removed my glasses. For several moments I simply stared at the table. Nearly 40 years. 40 years of saving. Planning. Working overtimes. Skipping vacations. Driving the same pickup truck for 16 years. Everything Margaret and I had built together had been treated like an available line of credit. Detective Simmons continued quietly. Some funds paid personal credit cards. Another page. Some paid mortgage balances. Another. Luxury vehicle purchases. Another. Investment losses. Thomas leaned forward. Investment losses. She nodded. Mr. Daniel Whitmore attempted several high-risk private investments. Were they successful? She looked directly at me. No. Incredible. He hadn't stolen my retirement because he needed food. Or medical care. Or survival. He gambled it chasing larger returns. The same impatience I had seen when he was 10 years old had simply grown more expensive. I asked one question. How much remains? She answered honestly. Less than half. The drive home that afternoon felt strangely peaceful. Not because I was happy. Because uncertainty had ended. For months I had wondered whether I was exaggerating. Whether grief had clouded my judgment. Whether perhaps I had misunderstood. There was nothing left to misunderstand. Facts have a calming effect. Even painful ones. That evening, I unlocked the small cedar chest Margaret had kept beside our bed. Inside were dozens of old photographs. Birthday parties. Camping trips. Christmas mornings. Daniel's graduation. His wedding. One photograph stopped me. Daniel was about 8 years old. He sat on my shoulders during the county fair. Both of us smiling. His tiny hands resting on my forehead. I remembered that exact afternoon. He had been afraid of crowds. So I carried him nearly 3 miles around the fairgrounds. Whenever he became nervous, I would say, "I've got you." Back then he believed me completely. I wondered when that little boy disappeared. Or perhaps, whether he had simply become someone who believed getting ahead mattered more than gratitude. The next breakthrough came unexpectedly. Emily called. "Can we meet?" Of course. We chose a small cafe across town. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. I moved out. I blinked. You and Daniel. She nodded. When? Last week. I'm sorry. So am I. She wrapped both hands around a cup of untouched coffee. I found something. My attention sharpened. What? She reached into her purse. Placed a flash drive on the table. I didn't know he kept copies. Copies of what? Everything. She looked around before continuing. Emails. My heartbeat quickened. Between Daniel and Mark. She nodded. I read them. What did they say? Her voice almost disappeared. They planned everything. Thomas nearly dropped his coffee when I handed him the flash drive later that afternoon. Within hours he had printed hundreds of pages. Email after email. Spreadsheet after spreadsheet. One subject line immediately caught my eye. Transition plan. Another. Guardianship timeline. Another. Asset conversion schedule. They hadn't acted emotionally. They had managed my life like a business project. One email from Mark read. Once the medical narrative is accepted, resistance becomes irrelevant. Daniel replied only 7 words. Then we move him before spring. Another message discussed selling my home. Another estimated renovation costs. Another debated whether keeping me in a private nursing facility would look better to the court. I kept reading. Then I reached one sentence that made me stop completely. Daniel had written, Dad still thinks I visit because I love him. I closed the folder. Not because I couldn't continue. Because I suddenly couldn't breathe. Thomas quietly took the papers from my hands. You don't have to read any more today. I do. No. He shook his head gently. You already know enough. For the first time since Margaret died. I cried. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Because there are some betrayals that no amount of preparation can soften. A week later, prosecutors officially filed criminal charges. Forgery. Financial exploitation of an elderly adult. Fraud. Identity theft. Conspiracy. The newspaper published a short article. No photographs. Just names. I never imagined seeing my son's name in the criminal section. Neighbors reacted differently. Some avoided eye contact. Some brought food. Others apologized for believing the rumors. One elderly man from my church stood beside me after Sunday service. He didn't mention the case. He simply squeezed my shoulder. I always knew you. That single sentence meant more than all the apologies combined. Reputation takes decades to build. Rumors can damage it in days. Trustworthy people remember the decades. The criminal trial was scheduled for late summer. Nearly 8 months after the guardianship hearing. 8 months gave everyone plenty of time to prepare. Prosecutors prepared evidence. Thomas organized financial records. Linda Brooks finalized her forensic signature report. Detective Simmons completed her investigation. And I listened to every recording again. Not because I enjoyed hearing them. Because I wanted to remember exactly why we were going to court. Revenge wasn't the reason. Recognition was. Truth deserved to be heard. Especially when lies had spoken for so long. The night before trial, I walked through every room of my house. Slowly. The living room. The kitchen. Margaret's sewing room. The back porch where we had watched sunsets for years. I placed one hand against the hallway wall. This house isn't just wood, I whispered. It's our life. Tomorrow strangers would discuss its financial value. Only I understood its real value. And tomorrow, for the first time, Daniel would have to answer questions instead of asking them. The morning of the trial began at 5:12 a.m. I know the exact time because I never really slept. I made coffee the same way Margaret had taught me 49 years earlier. 2 scoops, fresh water. No shortcuts. Routine has a strange way of calming the mind when everything else feels uncertain. I stood on the back porch holding my mug while the sun slowly appeared over the trees. The air was cool. The neighborhood was still asleep. For a few precious minutes there were no lawyers. No evidence. No accusations. Just another ordinary morning. I wished Margaret could have seen that sunrise. Then I smiled to myself. She probably had. Just from somewhere I could no longer reach. At exactly 7:30 Thomas pulled into my driveway. "You ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." He looked at me carefully. "You don't have to prove you're a good father today." "I know. You only have to tell the truth." Simple advice. Hard to remember when emotions become involved. The courthouse parking lot was already crowded. News of the case had spread far beyond our county. Financial exploitation involving family members always attracted attention because people secretly wondered the same question. Could it happen in my family? As we entered the building, reporters waited behind security barriers. Flashes from cameras reflected against the courthouse windows. No one shouted questions at me. Most simply watched. I kept walking. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors organized stacks of exhibits. Large monitors had been installed so the jury could review financial records and emails. The digital recorder sat inside a sealed evidence bag. Small, plain, ordinary. It looked insignificant. Yet it carried months of truth. Daniel entered through another door with his attorneys. He looked thinner than I remembered. His expensive suits had been replaced by a conservative grey one. His confidence had changed too. Months earlier he walked as though every room belonged to him. Today he kept adjusting his tie. He finally looked at me. For several seconds we simply stared at one another. No anger. No smiles. Just silence. Then something unexpected happened. He walked toward me. Thomas immediately stepped beside me. "It's all right," I said quietly. Daniel stopped about 6 feet away. "Dad," I nodded. "Daniel, I never wanted this." I looked at him for a long moment. "You planned it for nearly a year." He lowered his eyes. "It got out of control." "No," I answered calmly. "It went exactly where your decisions led it." His attorney called his name. He turned away without another word. That was the last private conversation we ever had. The jury entered. 12 ordinary citizens. Teachers, retirees, a nurse, an electrician. People who had never met us. People whose only responsibility was listening carefully. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Karen Mills, began with a calm opening statement. "This case is not about inheritance." She paused. "It is about theft disguised as caregiving." The jury listened closely. She continued. The defendant did not wait for his father to willingly transfer property. She pointed toward the evidence table. "He created documents." Another pause. "He created medical concerns." Another. "And he created a false story designed to remove an elderly man from control of his own life." There was no drama in her voice. Only facts. Daniel's attorney stood next. He painted a completely different picture. A devoted son. A grieving family. A misunderstanding complicated by agging. He admitted mistakes had been made. Paperwork. Miscommunication. Poor financial decisions. But he insisted there had never been criminal intent. The trial had officially begun. The prosecution called Detective Laura Simmons first. She explained the financial investigation carefully. Transaction after transaction. Dates, amounts, account numbers. The jury followed along using printed binders. By lunchtime, several jurors were already taking pages of notes. Next came the forensic accountant. He displayed charts showing money flowing from my retirement accounts into Daniel's personal accounts. Then into credit cards. Then into speculative investments. One chart alone covered nearly an entire screen. Blue lines. Red arrows. Dozens of transfers. The accountant summarized everything in one sentence. There was no legitimate financial purpose benefiting Mr. Robert Whitmore. Daniel avoided looking at the screen. The following morning, Linda Brooks testified. She explained handwriting analysis using enlarged photographs. She highlighted pressure points, stroke direction, natural rhythm. Finally, the prosecutor asked, "In your professional opinion, who signed these authorization forms?" Linda answered without hesitation, "Not Mr. Robert Whitmore." "What is your confidence level?" "Extremely high." Daniel's attorney attempted to challenge her. "Is handwriting analysis perfect?" "No. So you could be mistaken." "I could." She smiled politely. The same way a fingerprint examiner could theoretically be mistaken. A few jurors smiled. Then she added, "But after 32 years, I know the difference between natural writing and imitation." Her confidence carried weight. The prosecutor rested briefly. Then she called me. Walking to the witness stand felt strangely familiar after the guardianship hearing. Only this time something was different. I wasn't trying to defend myself anymore. I was helping explain a crime. The oath was administered. The prosecutor approached. "Mr. Whitmore." "Yes." "Tell the jury about your relationship with your son before these events." I smiled sadly. "I loved him." She waited. "I still do." Several jurors looked up from their notebooks. "Loving someone," I continued quietly, "doesn't mean pretending they didn't hurt you." The prosecutor nodded. "Please describe the changes after your wife passed away." I told them everything. The extra attention. The unexpected paperwork. The bank. The false signatures. The medical appointments. The guardianship petition. Every answer remained calm. Measured. Exactly as it happened. Then Karen Mills held up the digital recorder. "Mr. Whitmore." "Yes. Why did you begin recording conversations?" I answered honestly. "Because I realized no one believes an old man saying, 'That isn't what happened.'" The courtroom remained silent. So I decided to let people hear what happened instead. She pressed play. Once again. Daniel's own voice filled the courtroom. "Dad won't remember this conversation tomorrow." The jurors listened. No one interrupted. Another recording. "You don't really have a choice." Another. "It'll be mine eventually anyway." Karen stopped the audio. "Mr. Whitmore." "Yes." "Did you edit these recordings?" "No." "Did anyone tell you what to say during these conversations?" "No." "Were these ordinary discussions between you and your son?" "Yes." She nodded. No further questions. Daniel's attorney slowly approached for cross-examination. He smiled politely. "Mr. Whitmore." "Yes." "You love your son." "I do." "You've been grieving." "Yes." "Grief affects judgment." "It can." "You were lonely." "Yes." "So isn't it possible you misunderstood your son's intentions?" I answered immediately. "No." He picked up another document. "You admit your memory isn't perfect." "Nobody's is." "So you forget things." I sometimes forget where I leave my reading glasses. A few people chuckled softly. I don't forget who emptied my bank accounts. The judge reminded everyone to remain quiet. The attorney tried again. Mr. Whitmore. Yes. Your son believed he was helping. And I looked directly at him. If he believed that. I paused. And why did he need forged signatures? The attorney stopped speaking. For the first time during the trial. He had no follow-up question. No further questions. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Juror number 7. A middle-aged woman. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Daniel. Not with anger. With disappointment. There is a profound difference. Anger fades. Disappointment lingers. The prosecution rested its case that afternoon. The next morning, it would be Daniel's turn to explain the recordings the entire courtroom had now heard. Daniel took the witness stand just after 10 o'clock the following morning. He had a choice. His attorneys had advised him not to testify. I learned that later. But Daniel had always believed he could explain his way out of difficult situations. That confidence had served him well in business. Unfortunately for him, a courtroom rewards truth more than persuasion. He adjusted the microphone, swore to tell the truth, then folded his hands together exactly the way he always had before making an important sales presentation. His attorney began gently. Mr. Whitmore, did you love your father? Yes. Did you ever intend to harm him? No. Why did you become involved in his finances? Because after my mother died, he changed. In what way? He became isolated. He forgot appointments. He seemed overwhelmed. Everything sounded reasonable. Each sentence contained just enough truth to support a much larger lie. Yes, I had become quieter. Yes, I missed Margaret terribly. Yes, grief had changed me. But grief is not incompetence. His attorney continued. Did you personally benefit from managing his finances? Daniel hesitated. A little. What do you mean? I used some funds temporarily. With the intention of repaying them. Yes. When my investments recovered. That answer immediately caught the prosecutor's attention. She made a note without looking up. Daniel kept speaking. I always believed everything would work out. There it was again. Belief. Hope. Intentions. Everything except permission. After nearly an hour of direct testimony, the defense finished. Then Karen Mills slowly stood. She carried only one folder. No stack of papers. No dramatic gestures. Just a thin folder and a pen. She walked toward the witness stand. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. Good morning. You testified that you loved your father. Yes. I have no reason to doubt that. Daniel looked relieved. She continued. I'd like to discuss your actions. She picked up the first exhibit. Did you send this email? Yes. She displayed it on the large courtroom screen. Once the medical narrative is accepted, resistance becomes irrelevant. Did you write those words? Oh, yes. What did you mean by medical narrative? Daniel shifted in his chair. I meant his health. The phrase medical narrative isn't a medical diagnosis, is it? No. It describes a story. I suppose. She nodded once. And whose story was it? Silence. The jury waited. Finally Daniel answered quietly. Mine. Karen picked up another exhibit. This email says, then we move him before spring. She looked at him. Move him where? He swallowed. A care facility. Without his consent. If necessary. She let those words settle over the courtroom. Then she changed direction completely. Mr. Whitmore. Yes. When exactly did your father give you permission to transfer over $900,000? Daniel blinked. He trusted me. That wasn't my question. He knew I was helping. That wasn't my question either. She stepped closer. Did he ever say, Daniel, you may take this money and use it for your personal investments? No. Did he sign a valid authorization? I believed he intended to. She paused. I didn't ask what you believed. Long silence. No. The prosecutor nodded. Thank you. She picked up another D.